Here we are. How are you doing today?
I'm tired.
Same.
How you doing?
Good. I have a beer for the first time.
Wow.
I feel like
I
for
have a
while.
coffee today.
Look at that. I can't remember the last time I had a beer on the podcast.
It's been a while. It's been since the before video days.
Yeah. Because usually, as of late, we've been recording somewhat often on weekend mornings.
The best time for beer.
Best time for beer. Of course. Of course. We are back after a hiatus that no one noticed because I went on a trip and I scheduled the last episode 69, Dragon Inn and Goodbye Dragon Inn, to come out last Wednesday. And so now we're back on schedule this week with episode 70 of the Split Take podcast. Hooray. We're on YouTube again, officially this time. And just want to make a few notes that if you are watching on YouTube, please like, subscribe, comment. I'm sure we'll have some hot takes in this review discussion somewhere. So let us know how we're wrong. Please do. And then the other thing is I have been notified that sometimes we tend to ramble about things that are not on subject. I mean,
what is the subject? Give me names. Who's talking shit?
My dad. My dad's talking shit. Anyway, okay, one of his suggestions is that we tend to, I think specifically relating to our weekly movie check-in section.
That's fair.
Which I think is not an incorrect comment to make about the podcast, but not necessarily correct. So I would like to make a mention here that on YouTube, and I will try to do this for the podcast on Spotify and on the website, but specifically on YouTube so far, of the past couple of YouTube episodes, I have been doing like chapters for the podcast, and very specifically like labeling on those videos what we're talking about when we're talking about them and all that, so you can skip ahead if you don't mind to hear those conversations. I will try to include those time codes on in the show notes on Spotify and for the audio only version. So if you're not into the whole movie diary thing, then you can skip it. Skip right to our discussion of the two movies today. One is the Blow Up. That's not the tab I was looking for. The first movie is Blow Out from 1981, Brian De Palma, and our second movie, which is the BFI Sight and Sound 2012 list movie of the week, is Blow Up from 1966, directed by Michelangelo Antonioni. So that will be our main discussions happening later. But before we get to that, as always, I'm very curious to hear what Chandler has been up to while I have been away on vacation.
It's true. You have not watched a lot of movies. I've been doing the heavy lifting.
2 weeks. I think I've watched like 3 movies, maybe.
Yeah, see, there we go. I'll be quick. First one I watched, My Neighbor is the Yamadas.
That is one of my... It's one of those under the radar Studio Ghibli films, and one that I think should get more attention, but doesn't.
It's very cute. I was just going through whatever Ghibli movies I haven't seen on HBO Max. I watched it. It's essentially Japanese Peanuts. They're a little comic strip family in the movie. There's no real structure. It's just a bunch of little short stories with this family. I watched the dub, which is great. It has Molly Shannon and Jim Belushi of Twin Peaks fame. It was very cute, very simple. I have no complaints. None of the stories were annoying. I thought they were all very lovable characters, and it's got a very innocent sense of humor that I'm surprised I found as funny as I did.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've seen it, but I seem to remember that it was it had some deceptively complex commentary. I don't want to say commentary, but lessons about just like family life and living and stuff like that. And I specifically remember, isn't the song "Que Sera Sera"? They sing that song
at the end
of the film. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a sweet little film about life, about families, and I think it has some nothing necessarily to say, but just some commentary.
It's
some good vibes.
Comfortable. It's very comfortable.
Yeah.
I rewatched Ocean's 11. That's a damn near perfect movie. Not going to go into it.
Haven't seen it in years.
It's so good. It's very good.
I'll take your word for it.
It's one of the most efficient movies. I watched a new movie, Saint Maud. I don't know if you heard of this one.
Wasn't that from last year?
Well, it just went on Hulu this year.
Oh, so Saint Maud. No. I typed Saint Maul, as in Darth Maul from the prequels.
M-A-U-D.
Yes, okay, I remember this. Oh wait, this is a 2019 film.
Well, technically.
Yes.
It's one of those that I'm sure it premiered at a few festivals in 2019, but it didn't get a wider release till 2020. Now it's on Hulu.
So
one
what
of those
did you
movies,
think of Saint Maud?
Well, when I saw the trailer, I kind of figured I knew what it was going to be about. Just a psychotic young woman who is way too into religion, and that's exactly what it was. It's fine.
Okay.
If I find this kind of stuff very interesting, but it's one of those movies that until the literally very last scene, it didn't pull any punches, wasn't really surprising in any way. I saw the trailer, I thought it's going to be exactly what I think it's going to be. I watched it and it was. It's fine. It's only like 82 minutes. If you're looking for new stuff, I recommend it. I watched Enter the Dragon.
Bruce Lee?
Bruce Lee, yep.
Yes, okay.
I tried to watch North by Northwest. HBO Max's app is terrible, so I had to quit. I went into Netflix, and the first thing I saw was Enter the Dragon, and I thought, let's do it. Never seen a Bruce Lee movie before. And it was fun.
Really?
Never seen one. Nope. Unless you count Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Which you don't, but...
The thing about Enter the Dragon is it's very good, but the whole time I'm like, this is just a few inches away from being like a best of the worst movie.
Yeah.
It has a lot of the staples being like a pretty nonsense plot, really bad ADR, kind of cheesy dialogue, but it's good because Bruce Lee is amazing. The choreography is solid, and the premise is so simple that it's kind of hard to fuck it up. But speaking of this, this feeling that it was similar to a best of the worst movie, I looked up this director's other work, and one of the things that he directed was Gymkata.
Gymkata, what a poster there too.
Which, for anyone who's not familiar, Best of the Worst is the Red Letter Media series where they watch 3 terrible movies. And Gymkata is sometimes, yes. And Gymkata is a movie about Kurt Thomas, who was a U.S. Olympic athlete, but he's a gymnast, and they built a movie around him, and it's kind of horrible. But now I know why the Best of the Worst vibes are there. I rewatched a bunch of stuff. F for Fake, Chungking Express, The Friends of Eddie Coyle.
Great.
All great movies.
Any additional thoughts on Friends of Eddie Coyle? Just curious, as you know, F for Fake, clearly a masterpiece.
Clearly
Chungking Express, clearly also a masterpiece. But Friends of Eddie Coyle, that's kind of a low key film. Not a lot of...
It is. Friends of it. I much prefer the Goodfellas, Sopranos type gangster movies where they show it for what it is, just a bunch of shitty people doing shitty things to each other. And this is the Friends of Eddie Coyle is essentially a movie about a bunch of people lying and ratting on each other, which I think is a lot more indicative of the reality of gangster life. And it's interesting because it was released by the same studio that released The Godfather a year after The Godfather. So you have this operatic auteur picture of, drawing parallels between mafia and, their status is like demigods. And then you have Eddie Coyle, which is just a bunch of old people.
Sad old people.
Sad old people doing crimes and going to jail for it. I really like it because I really like Robert Mitchum. He's kind of one of my favorite actors. And I don't know. I could watch this movie 3 times in a row.
Wow.
going through real quick here. I finished Paranoia Agent. This is a very good miniseries by Satoshi Kon.
Anime?
Yep, anime series. Satoshi Kon, 13 episodes. It's very trippy. It's very much in line with Perfect Blue and Paprika. Not really much to say because it's a whole series, so you haven't seen it. I'm not going to go too into it, but I definitely recommend it. I watched Profile, which is a movie about a woman who it's a movie that takes place entirely on a computer screen about a woman who poses as a Muslim woman trying to join ISIS. The entire movie hinges on this idea that this lady would fall in love with this ISIS recruiter. But one of the first things that they show is this ISIS recruiter assisting in the murder of children. It's so dumb. It's very dumb.
Even child murderers can be loved, Chandler.
Well,
that's the message. It's a heartwarming message of love and death.
I finally got around to watching The Exorcist 3. It's very good.
Is it?
Very good. I was surprised. William Peter Blatty has only directed 2 movies, and I want to see his other one called The Ninth Configuration. And they're both religious. There's some genuinely disturbing imagery in this movie, like more so than I was expecting. Like, I know it's an Exorcist movie, but this one is kind of creepier than the original Exorcist.
Well, I mean, even the original Exorcist, by today's standards, we would not call that like a creepy film. I don't know anyone.
There's some really scary parts, but yeah.
Are there? But scary?
Yes. I think so.
I don't
scary,
think so.
Scary and creepy are different to me. Exorcist is scary. Exorcist 3 is creepy. Very creepy.
Okay.
Like, they have this dream sequence that feels Lynchian, but not in a copycat kind of way. I recommend it. Very spooky. George C. Scott is amazing. I love him and everything. I just like hearing him yell.
He's good at that.
He is. But finally, I'm going to bridge the gap between us and talk about a movie that I saw that you saw, which is The Woman in the Window.
Oh, yes. I forgot about this discussion. This is our bonus. Every episode nowadays, like last episode, it was Tenant. We have a bonus duo conversation. So it's kind of almost like reviewing 3 movies these days per episode. But who knows? So Woman in the Window. It's a new movie. That much we can say for certain.
That is the best praise I can give it.
It is new. If you like new, if new is a positive quality in and of itself for you, then perhaps you should watch it. In literally no other context should you watch this.
No. So this movie, I was interested because I find it fascinating just the recent fall of Amy Adams. Because I feel like she's been in some really good stuff, but in the last 2 or 3 years, it's been nothing but garbage. You had the Justice League, which I know technically wasn't, recent. Well, I'm not going to say that because we already talked about the Justice League. But, like Hillbilly Elegy, Vice, just this. And I knew going into it that I wasn't going to like it.
Sure. To be fair about Vice, though, that's like Adam McKay is a actual director.
Yes.
And so, like, if you were saying, if like an actor is looking for roles and looking for good roles, she just got unlucky with that one because it just happened to be a movie. There are, of course, other roles that have been picked that are like, why did you choose that one?
Yeah.
It's just clearly not a good movie is, from the start.
The guy who directs this, though, he's done some stuff that's good. He did Atonement. He did Pride and Prejudice. I mean, these are pretty good movies. But yeah, I went into this knowing I wasn't going to like it, but I was under the impression that, okay, if I'm going to go into this not liking it, I'm going to be pleasantly surprised because that's usually what happens with these kind of movies. I went into it hating it more than I thought I possibly could.
Interesting. I went into it because you had sent a Snapchat to the group notifying us that you were watching it. And I was like, oh, I've heard of this. I've heard it's not good. And so it piqued my interest and kind of like curiosity killed the cat sort of thing. So I was like, you know what, I'm gonna watch it. Why not? And I fully expected to. I knew it wasn't going to be good, but I thought that there was a decent chance that I was going to enjoy how not good it was, which I kind of did at parts, and other parts it was kind of excruciating.
It is. There's so many things wrong with it that I don't even know where to begin. But the whole time, the concept for people who aren't aware is Amy Adams plays a homebody agoraphobiac.
Yeah, she's afraid of going outside.
She's afraid of going outside. Who witnesses a murder from her apartment, or what she thinks is a murder.
Which this,
if it sounds familiar.
I mean, this relates to Rear Window, of course, because it's very clearly based on that. It's also based on a book. I didn't know if you knew that.
Yes.
It's an adaptation, which itself was copied from something else. So I think there's like layers of copying going on here that are fantastic. And apparently the author's a fraud. Don't.
Yeah.
Don't quote me on that.
I've heard that the story revolving around the author is more interesting than the actual book. But by the time I finished the movie, I'm like, I don't want to know anything more about this.
I was a little curious. Anyway, so I was trying to get at that. It's also kind of, it shares some similarities with Blow Up.
It does.
So, more
but
connections.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you hear the concept and you're like, okay, that's very clearly a Rear Window. And I went into it thinking, oh, I'm just going to be thinking about how good Rear Window is the whole time I'm watching it, which happened right away because it opens with a scene of her watching Rear Window.
Yeah, it doesn't shy away from the Hitchcock connection.
Yeah. But then the whole time I'm watching it, I'm like, okay, this is really dumb. And then in my brain, I'm like, this is why it works in Rear Window. So I can make a big laundry list of why it's inferior to Rear Window in every single way. But it's so similar to Rear Window that it like Blow Up and Blow Out we'll get to, but they're similar, but they're different enough that they don't feel like remakes of each other.
Very different, like clearly inspired by, like they're inspired by products. This is clearly a copy and paste kind of deal.
Yes.
Which is fine. And it's not necessarily an issue on its own, but it is.
Yeah.
Here.
Yeah. Well, again, the copy and paste thing doesn't matter to me if you do something interesting. Like you could say Halloween is copy and paste of Black Christmas, and so many other slasher movies are copy and paste of Halloween.
A copy and
but
paste,
it doesn't matter.
Right. A copy and paste, you could just say, is a remake in a way.
Yeah. Or
and
Yojimbo Fistful of Dollars.
Right.
Nothing wrong with that. But this is just it's not copy and paste. They copied it by hand. But their handwriting is much worse.
I also think like they copied and pasted things, and then sure, there are things that like you can point to and be like, this doesn't work here, but it does work in Rear Window. And then I think the really bad stuff is the stuff that they added, which, I mean, you can say, oh, this is Rear Window didn't have this, so this is why it's better. But stuff they added that it has nothing to do with Rear Window at all is just, that is where like the psychological element of a woman in the window just doesn't work at all. And it starts off just being kind of like, ugh, like nothing, like meh, a big meh. And then about halfway through the movie, the whole psychological element that Amy Adams is going through, it becomes bad. It becomes campy and not in a good way.
And then the ending is just stupid. The final climax is just...
That's when I started enjoying it again, because I was like, okay, now you've...
Well, when she gets hit in the face with a rake, that's where it gets funny.
You've gone too far, like at that point. Like there was the first half of the film, which deals primarily with her, with Amy Adams figuring out the murder, kind of, but not really, of her engaging with the clues. And then there's like a twist sort of in the middle, where we get a revelation about her character that kind of derails the investigative plot for a little bit. until it reappears. Spoiler alert. I will include time codes so you can just kind of go through, but please don't worry about spoilers. You really don't need to watch this. Spoiler alert. The murderer is the kid, and he arrives and gives an evil monologue about how he's a serial killer, and then they fight and he falls through glass, and it's hilarious.
It is. But it's funny because even that scene, and there's like a dream sequence too that feel so Hitchcock. Like, I think there's a lot of this movie has already exited my brain, but there's like a nightmare dream sequence thing that feels like literally the same thing from Vertigo. And then the way he falls through the screen looks the same way as that nightmare in Vertigo. And it's so shameless. And everyone is overacting. Gary Oldman is just shouting the entire
I love
time.
Like Gary Oldman's one of those actors where he's just on screen and I don't care what he's doing. I don't know if you got this sense. I just liked Gary Oldman in the film.
I do
thought
too.
He was giving a decent performance, not necessarily a good performance, but something was there. And I pin this on the direction entirely, because there was a moment, and I don't know if you caught this or if anyone else did. There was a moment in the middle of the film where Gary Oldman delivers a line, and his line delivery itself, I could tell the answer to the film. Like, I figured out the film by line delivery, and by extension, that was the wrong direction. Like, I've never seen such a clear case of wrong direction by a director that I could like transparently tell. I don't know if you know what this is, the scene I'm talking about.
I don't think I do.
Okay, so there's a scene in, maybe it's about like 1/3 of the way through the movie, where he enters Amy Adams' her house.
Yeah.
And he shouts at her, "Stay away from my son." And I don't know if so I've taken a few directing classes in college, and the way you were taught to like interact with actors is not like to tell them, "Oh, do this exactly," but to like use verbs. It's like to anyway, doesn't matter. But
yes,
like, so here's your line, and the director says, "I want you to protect," is the verb of like how you're going to do the line delivery and all that. And I could very clearly tell that Gary Oldman went from to threaten, like his actions were threatening beforehand, and then his line delivery, go back, I swear it's incredibly obvious if you know what you're looking for. He goes from to threaten to protect, which is like a different set of verbs. It's a different verb, not a separate verb. And I could tell from the line that he was protecting his son, not threatening her. Like, there's different motivations there, and I could tell from the line delivery, which I think he gave the correct line delivery, and the director gave him the wrong action verb to go from. And from that, I was like, oh, it's the son, because the dad's trying to protect the son. Also because the dad's too obvious as the murderer, and that can't be the solution. This movie isn't clever enough to pull like a oh, you didn't think it was the dad, but it was the dad, but it was actually, it's stupid. The whole thing's stupid. But I figured out about halfway through just from that line delivery, like, it's the son, isn't it?
Also, the idea that you could just replace the mom in our modern age, where every day has some sort of digital footprint, is just ridiculous.
Right. It's very selective in that. Like, it contrives the situation where like there's no media of this person at all, except for the one piece of evidence that our main
evidence, the very blurry reflection in a wine. It's just so dumb. And the thing is, I don't want to go through this whole thing and say why it doesn't work, but a huge part of it is that Amy Adams is just annoying in this movie. She is an annoying character. And you don't start to really be on board with her until you realize halfway through what happened to her. But even then, I'm not fully on board because I'm still just annoyed by her.
You perhaps, this is like when you're writing a script, you want their audience to empathize with the character. but we are sympathizing with her in like the last half. We're not like,
yes,
don't care. We're not with her on her story. Rather, we feel pity for her as a person rather than actually being invested in the plot and what she's trying to accomplish.
Same thing with Julianne Moore's character, who, like, you know, her disappearance.
Scene.
She's so for one scene, she's also annoying, and
I kind of liked it. Like, I had this feeling like this is all we're gonna see of her, of Julianne Moore, isn't it? And I'm just gonna enjoy it while it's here. Not that it was good. Don't take me as that giving it praise. I was just like, oh, hi, Julianne Moore.
Everyone except for Gary Oldman was annoying. Also, the two cops. Brian Tyree Henry, who's the bigger, blacker gentleman. I love that guy. He's in Atlanta. He's one of the best parts of Atlanta. But all of the movies that he's been in have just been awful.
What else has he been in?
He was Godzilla vs. Kong. He was the conspiracy theory guy in Godzilla vs. Kong. He's in this. While not an awful movie, he is also in Joker. He's like the guy who works at Arkham
Joker's
Asylum.
Not. Godzilla vs. Kong isn't a bad movie either, but
it's funny because the two characters from Atlanta who have had like similarly expanding film roles is you have Brian Tyree Henry, who I just told you is in all that stuff, and then the other guy in Atlanta who went off is Lakeith Stanfield.
Oh wow.
Who, Uncut Gems, Knives Out, Sorry to Bother You, has been in some great stuff. But then the other detective, I'm like, who is that woman? She looks so familiar to me. Llewyn Davis's sister.
That's an interesting jump in quality.
It's funny because I was looking at him I looked on Letterboxd who it was, and she only has like 3 credits, and one of them is Llewyn Davis. I'm like, who is she? And then I look it up.
Wow.
But yeah. Woman in the Window. I don't recommend, not even for the laughs. It's just frustrating.
It's like it's a dumb psychological mystery. It's a mystery film, which is why I watched it. Because it's a murder.
But it's not your kind of mystery film.
No, but I am, I like the genre regardless, and it's tangentially related, so who cares? And I do like Amy. I think Amy Adams.
I do too.
She's a good actress.
She's a very good actress.
Maybe she'll get some better roles at some point.
She just really wants that Oscar. She's desperate for that Oscar.
You know what? Okay, so I will end with a positive note. I can say something positive about the film. Sort of. It does look nice. Sort of.
It does, but it's wildly inconsistent. Because I feel like they're doing the similar Hitchcock thing where they're really emphasizing the colors, specifically the like magenta pink stuff, but it feels so inorganic.
Yeah, I was going to say it feels superficial.
Yes.
Like
pointed style.
This is how I'm going to phrase my positive note here. It is better than nothing.
No, I agree.
And it's superficial. But it's there. Like I was at least like, oh, this house looks nice. So I can pay attention to the woodwork and the nice lighting, colored lighting on the woodwork. But I also was like, at the same time, why I call it superficial, is that the fact that it's lit and like it looks really nice, a nice house and everything, and it's colorful and vibrant. This woman is depressed, and do you think that was the correct color scheme to go with to visualize?
Also, her house looks like a haunted mansion. It's so dusty and grimy for like no reason. Yeah. I will say this: it did give me infinitely more appreciation for Rear Window, and it's moved up in my top 50 favorite list.
That's good
because it's probably my favorite Hitchcock, and now I want to watch it again. I've only seen it twice, and both times were in the theaters.
Wow.
It is an amazing theater experience.
Okay, I will.
Yeah, let's hear what you watched.
What I've watched, which isn't much.
Puppy.
Wonderful. So, I rewatched Before Sunrise, 1995, Richard Linklater. First film of the Before trilogy, and how to say this? It's one of those movies where I think you have to be in the mood for it, sort of. I'm talking about like general audiences.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
If you're in the mood for a really great relationship film, I mean, there's nothing better.
Would you say that you need to be in the mood for love?
I think you would, yeah. I don't know what it was, but I was feeling it this time around. I watched this on my trip. Showed my dad, and 90% of the time I will recommend movies to my dad. Like, here's a movie. I liked it. 50-50 chance you're going to like it. He has a very interesting taste. This one, I was like, I know he's going to like it. And I was right. Because it's a great film. If you don't like Before Sunrise. So when I say you have to be in the mood, I've never not liked Before Sunrise.
Yeah.
I've never not thought it was a great movie. I've just not connected with it in the same way that I did this past viewing. And this past viewing, it was previously at 5 stars, but it continued to be at 5 stars and got on my favorite movies list. Just because I was there. I was vibing with it. And the Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy. Such great actors. I am so looking forward to watching the other 2 films in the trilogy. I just haven't gotten around to it yet. Busy week, getting back. I've been very tired.
I feel it. Anyway. It is one of the best criterions that I have. And I definitely recommend it because the way that they made this film is very interesting. Because Richard Linklater based it on an experience, and he basically just brought in both actors, and they rehearsed and wrote the scenes together. So one of the reasons that the acting is so good is because Richard Linklater just didn't hand them lines and have them rehearse it. A lot of this stuff is written by the two, and that's why it's one of those.
Which is similar to My Dinner with Andre.
Yes, exactly.
Talk heavy. Movie.
Exactly. Yeah, it's one of my favorites. Personally, of the 3, I gave them all 5 stars because I think they're all perfect. My favorite is Before Sunset, so I'm curious to see how you'd feel about that one on a rewatch. But, oh, God, it's just such simple filmmaking, such great romantic escapism, such real-sounding conversations.
And real, but also, like, introspective in a way that most real conversations aren't, but in a good way. In the way that, like, a Tarantino dialogue is, where it's not, it's not real.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you are so engaged, and it's very approachable for a film that is entirely talking, and they're talking about big ideas and stuff. And it could be pretentious in like an alternate version of reality, but it's not. It's down to earth. It never becomes about ideas per se, but just about sharing emotions and feelings and being together.
And even those scenes where the dialogue does come off that way, it works because the characters are kind of like that. They're very much like 22-year-olds. Ethan Hawke is like perfect as the, wannabe writer type guy who's just going to Vienna for fun. So when the conversations stray to those more movie-like qualities, you're like, okay, this is what this character would be saying. Julie Delpy too, but yeah, just absolutely perfect.
Great movie.
Glad you enjoy it.
I will even reserve my official final estimation for when I've completed the trilogy, but I would strongly recommend to the BFI critics and directors, put one of these movies on the BFI list next.
You got to put some Richard. You get Richard Linklater. You got Days Confused, Boyhood. The
get rid of them.
Hey, I like Boyhood, but one of these.
Okay, it's fine.
School of Rock.
Fine. I'm okay. Before Sunrise, or Before Sunset. Put one of those. Put one of those,
please.
Anyway, the next movie I watched is a little movie from 1982 called Eating Raoul. It is in the Criterion Collection. It's directed by Paul Bartel, who also acts in it. There's not too many. I don't think there's any other really famous actors. People who might know. Anyway, it is an interesting movie about a very dull Los Angeles couple who are trying to buy their dream restaurant and decide to start a scheme of murdering how to say this, sex-craved lunatics by luring people with like hopes of sex to their apartment and then murdering them and stealing their money.
Awesome.
It is a
Kind of
very
based.
it's a strange film. It's a very kind of low budget film. It's fun. It is interesting in that it is kind of thematically similar to Blow Up, not in a plot sense, but in the sense of like hedonism and decadence of a city during a specific time. So it starts out with this interesting montage of like 1980s Hollywood. Everyone's after sex and money, and no one cares about real people anymore. And it goes from there. It is a very interesting, not really a time capsule. It's kind of like a parody of Hollywood. It is about Hollywood. It's not about filmmaking though. Interesting movie. Glad I watched it. It's fine. It's kind of abruptly ends, and I'm not sure what the point the filmmaker was trying to get at, or if it really comes together in kind of a satisfying way. Don't think it did, but
I've seen this cover before, and the cover is very interesting, and I always assumed it was another food movie.
It is a food movie in a way. Yes.
Okay. Just like Silence of the Lambs.
He's a wine snob, the main character. Anyway, that's Eating Raoul. And then the other movie I watched, the other movies I watched, we already talked about. Women in the Window, and then Blow Up, Blow Out. So here's a question.
Yes.
Regarding our discussions today. We usually do our BFI movie second, but we could do it first this time since it is the original, or we could do it second and just maintain our order.
I'm down for either.
Up to you. I don't know. I don't know what I want to talk about first. Let's keep the regular order. Let's talk about Blow Out. Yes, I keep getting them not mixed up, but
confused.
Mixed up. Yeah. Yes. So you recommended Blow Out. This is a movie I haven't seen. So how about you introduce it?
All right. Well, Blow Out is a very loose, I don't want to say remake, I don't want to say retelling, but it's very loosely based on Blow Up. It centers around a B-movie sound man who, while out recording new wind sounds, stumbles upon a car crash, captures the sound of it, and then doing some investigative work, he starts to realize it was less of a crash and more of an assassination attempt, not an attempt, an assassination, and he basically tries to get to the bottom of what happened, all while Lord Farquaad tries to cover the tracks and kill him. This is a movie that I saw 2 or 3 years ago for the first time. I don't know what... Oh, I remember exactly what drew me to it. This is the movie that Quentin Tarantino saw and then realized he wanted John Travolta for Pulp Fiction.
Yeah.
And I can see why. Because at the time, John Travolta was, Saturday Night Fever, Grease. This is very against type for him. And I went into it with that expectation, but 3 years ago I saw it, absolutely loved it. I think it's a very incredibly made film with an incredibly tight story. This time around, I love it even more.
Interesting. Wow.
It's one of my favorites, honestly. Putting it somewhere on the list. This is the only Brian De Palma film I've seen as well. And typically I can't as we talked about before, I can't really get into filmmakers that, I don't want to say ape Hitchcock so much, because it's a very Hitchcockian movie, but I think there's just enough of its own flavor that it doesn't feel like a retreading of Hitchcock. It's a very vibrant film from a filmmaking standpoint. And I was listening to the commentary on the Criterion. I don't know, do you have the Criterion or did you just watch it?
I just watched it.
The Criterion has an interview recorded in 2010, and it's conducted by Noah Baumbach, who really likes this movie. And I heard Brian De Palma talking about how basically he thinks the most boring thing in the world is coverage and shot reverse shot, where every single scene, every camera movement, every camera setup needs to keep up with the story thematically. And I watched that before watching it this recent time, and I just really realized just how much filmmaking flair there is. Like, there's a lot of really flashy stuff, but there's a lot of really subtle stuff as well. So I'm curious to see whether or not you liked it.
So, Blowout. I'm conflicted almost.
Oh no.
I mean, for right out of the way, right out of the bat, it's a good movie. Blowout is a good movie. Like there's nothing, you can't really deny that. It left me wanting more. Like, I don't think it comes together as well as it thinks it does. And so I'm curious to hear from you. Not all the elements work together, and thematically, I think it kind of creates its thematic resonance in the last 5 minutes of the film. Although I have a lot of respect, and I loved watching it in terms of craft and visually. Although I think for me, it came off as more a lot of style and not a lot of substance, which is fine. Wasn't necessarily, I'm not like, it wasn't a problem. Except, and this is the big exception, because I do like this film and I think I'm going to give it a rewatch. I'm pretty sure I like it a little more on a rewatch. But I think Brian De Palma has relied on music too much. Way too much.
I will say this.
It was annoying, quite frankly.
Okay.
In the climax of the film, this is what like left me wanting more in a film about audio recording, about an audio recordist. I felt that the audio in the film was lazy at times and could have used the different ways that audio is used. With that being said, like there's some really creative ways, and I like the beginning of the film. There's a scene. Well, there is the scene where John Travolta is recording the audio that starts the whole thing off. Amazing scene. And like, that's like a perfect example of how Brian De Palma is, I almost want to call it like expressionistic filmmaking or like wild filmmaking. He's just like lights, camera, let's do this, split screen, whatever works.
Split screen.
Like,
I love the split screen.
Willing to do whatever works for the scene. At least like to tell it creatively and visually. And that I really like about the film. And it's really just kind of the ending didn't vibe with me in terms of its thematic closure and the music. But these are, I think, ultimately small criticisms.
I will agree in the music. I didn't think it was necessarily too much of it. Maybe I just was too engrossed in the movie itself. But the actual music itself is just... It feels like Bernard Herrmann B-sides. You know, it's not super unique. It's definitely... It's well-composed music, but in its most notable scenes, it does feel overwhelming. I can't necessarily agree that it was used too much, but maybe I'll feel a different way.
To be fair, sorry. I'm going to give Brian De Palma is a very competent filmmaker, very good filmmaker. So I'm willing to give it the benefit of the doubt that perhaps it almost feels like near the end exploitative in like how much music it's working, manipulative. And I'm almost willing to give Brian De Palma a benefit of the doubt, and like that's the point, that it is over manipulating you. Although I didn't quite figure out why that might be the case. So, you know, another viewing might lend some reason behind why that was chosen.
I do agree that the idea of a movie so much revolving around sound should play more with sound. But a lot of the sound elements to me weren't necessarily about the actual use of sound itself, but the way that he frames the analysis of sound. Because one thing that I love about this movie is that it is analog porn. The scenes where John Travolta is just fucking around the tapes, I could see why some people who maybe aren't as interested in the tactile nature of filmmaking of yesteryear would find that scene boring. But just watching him reversing the footage, going backwards, getting that little white pen and marking on it, and then layering it or syncing it up with the pictures taken from the scene, it's just stuff like that where it's so like if you did that today, it would take 3 seconds. You do it in Premiere, and it wouldn't be interesting. And there's a nostalgic side to it. I never lived in that time. I can't say I prefer that stuff. I love how easy Premiere is, but those scenes in general, it's just the way those tight close-ups on all these big machines that I have no fucking clue how you even work them. Those scenes to me are just what this movie's about. But as far as the ending goes, I want to bring in something that I learned from those supplements that I think really helps inform the ending. Because this movie, the story came about through Brian De Palma's obsession with the JFK assassination, where he became super obsessed with the JFK assassination, read every single book on it, and as he was compiling and investigating and going through all of these resources and books and stuff like that, he came to the realization that it wouldn't matter because it's been done and you are against forces that are too large to go up against. I think it's something that translates really well into the age of QAnon. These fucking wacko conspiracy theorists who will take any little thread and just see where they can go with it. Obviously, this has a lot more rooted in reality. But I find that idea that you're up against this unbeatable force. I find that is what the ending's about, because John Travolta is just one guy with Nancy Allen, and he's going up against whatever forces at play are trying to take out this politician. And in the end, they win. And no, that's not a happy ending. That's not an informative ending. But I do understand where he's coming from.
Yeah, and I don't know. I disagree. I get a different sense from the film that it isn't about greater forces in a way. Like I almost feel like it doesn't go far enough in its criticism. Like it had the potential to be a lot more biting in its criticism of both American politics and Hollywood. In that the ultimate, like the villainy of the film is in John Lithgow, who it just kind of seems like his own agent operating separate from the people who hired him, which we see in a scene, which kind of mitigates the feeling for me, and why I was maybe a little less engaged with the ending of, like, in the beginning it feels like, oh, there could be a vast conspiracy, and then we learn, oh, it's just John Lithgow just tying up loose ends, and his employers don't give a shit anymore, and he kind of is going off the deep end. And so it feels less about a giant system oppressing them and more about...
Who are his employers? Who's he talking to?
He has a phone call with someone. I don't know. Yeah. I assumed it was the president or something. Political people. Who cares?
Yeah.
Which, on one hand, that's good. Like the background forces, the political forces are in the background and kind of shadowy figures. I just think they might be too in the background to make it feel like he's up against a real system. Instead, it feels like he's up against John Lithgow. The other biting criticism that I think the film has, but could be more explicit in, is that in the end, a very interesting choice is that the, spoiler alert, the screams of the main girl, what's her name?
Nancy Allen.
Nancy Allen are used in the exploitative horror, low budget horror film. Yeah. And I almost feel like it would have been like, if you were to say like, oh, he's making a comment about the exploitative nature of Hollywood or about the commoditization of violence and turning that into a product for people to enjoy and using that.
Yeah.
Which is there. My issue though, is that if you were to like looking at it, these are just like low budget, crappy Philadelphia made movies. It's not a criticism aimed at Hollywood, which I think it very much could be a criticism aimed at a larger force. So like, it's a smaller film than I think sometimes it feels like it is, at least thematically.
I had two different interpretations of that ending. One of which being it was almost John Travolta's way of punishing himself. Because he's left. That was my first, however many years ago I saw it. But my second one this most recent time, and again, I know these are low budget Hollywood or Philadelphia B movies, but when I watched it this time, my interpretation was that him using the voice clip for Nancy Allen was his way of sort of immortalizing her, because she was kind of a no one. She was just, you know, prostitute that got killed by what now people think is a serial killer who killed prostitutes. She had no one but him. He's gone. He feels guilty that he inadvertently, you know, caused her death. So this was his attempt to immortalize her, to give her life a bigger meaning, to not let her go forgotten. But neither of those interpretations, I think, are backed up enough by the movie. Because I remember when I first watched it, I thought, why would he do that?
Yeah,
like it's really cool because it's a really nice. It's like one of those things where it's a scene. It reminds me a lot of The Usual Suspects at the end, that big reveal. But then it's a reveal that it knocks you flat on your feet the first time. Then the more you think about it, you're more like, what? That's stupid. But I don't know. Maybe it's just the way I felt the first time I saw it. But that ending doesn't bother me. But the more and more I think about it, it doesn't really make sense. But you also have to understand that this movie, there's a lot of this movie's DNA in Under the Silver Lake, so maybe that's why I love this movie so much.
My criticism as of it not going perhaps far enough, or it feeling smaller than it is with regards to, like, he's not up against the system, he's more up against a person. These are more like not minor criticisms, but they don't actively harm the film itself. Rather, they don't elevate it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like an above and beyond kind of thing. It's doing what it needs to in order to tell an interesting story. It just could have been, I felt an opportunity to have some more tension and stakes. And
the thing about this movie to me is that this script it's a good script, a few pegs away from being great. But to me, most of what makes this movie great is the filmmaking. Yeah. To me, it's such great filmmaking that it covers up a lot of its mistakes. One of my favorite scenes in the entire movie is that flashback sequence where we see John Travolta basically wire a cop. It's a quick little 5-minute scene that really kind of feels like it's out of nowhere. But it's so good that I don't mind, and that's kind of my whole thesis for the movie. A lot of questionable script decisions that are made invisible by stellar filmmaking.
Yeah, there's another shot in the film that I kind of pulled out near the second half when I was still engaged. I just maybe not as much. When the main
Nancy
Allen is her and the video guy that filmed the assassination.
Yeah, John Polito.
Yes, and
not John Polito.
He assaults her and she knocks him out, and like the scene is just bathed in red, and the camera like glides up to the ceiling to be like an overhead shot of the room. I felt that was fun. That was just like Brian De Palma having fun filming a scene in an interesting way and not making it just standard. Well, the other great shot was I think Tarantino uses a similar kind of shot in Reservoir Dogs, where like it's the people are having a conversation and the camera circles around them. This is a shot that's been done a lot.
What scene was this?
No, I was talking about Reservoir Dogs as the circle around shot. And what I was eventually saying is I don't like that shot.
Wait, the one in the studio where John Travolta is like running around and
yes, and in this
you don't
film,
like that shot?
No. No.
Okay.
I don't like it used in dialogue scenes. I don't like around like it feels excessive. In this film, it was a great use of a camera shot going around and around of creating a feeling as he's running around, realizing that his tapes have been erased. That I think worked. That's a piece of filmmaking that not always. Sometimes Brian De Palma just uses flair and flashy filmmaking just for the sake of it, which is fine. But that was a case where like I felt the filmmaking matched up with the tone and the mood of the scene in a way that enhanced it.
There are other scenes later on in the film when, John Travolta is getting deeper and deeper into this conspiracy, where a lot of scenes are being filmed from the outside. the outside looking into the windows or above looking through like a hole in the ceiling. And he was talking on the supplements that those shots kind of match his paranoia because it's like the camera's watching him without him knowing. It sort of mirrors his paranoia. It's a lot of stuff like that that really elevates it. But I don't know. It's so much fun. So many split diopters.
Yes. Brian De Palma's a fan of that. I knew that from the Untouchables, I think I've seen.
Yeah.
And I know I've seen another Brian De Palma. But he loves his split diopter shots. And
the
who
thing
can blame
about
him?
split diopters is I don't usually like them because I feel like most split diopters, for people who don't know, split diopters is the type of shot where you have something really close in the foreground that's in focus on one side of the screen, and then the other side of the screen, you have something in the far background that's also in focus.
Because usually when you focus on something that's so close to the camera, the background gets blurry and isn't in focus. So you have to use a special filter in order to achieve that effect.
It's a little filter that you put over the lens that sort of splits the screen in half and splits the focus in half. And the reason I typically don't like these shots is because they're done so in a way where you can very clearly see the line, because there'll be like part of the center of the frame, half of it, the depth of field would just be so shallow, and the other half would just be so deep. And it just looks ugly because half the screen is very blurry. But Brian De Palma does his split diopters in a way that masks that line. Like the first one is when John Travolta is listening to the cops who are about to come over and talk to him. The split diopter is like right in between them on this white wall. And it's just a plain white wall, and you can't really see the depth of field differences because it's just a white wall. I love the one with the owl.
That's almost like a split screen. That's not.
It is a split diopter, but there's also split screen, which me and you have talked about. Split screen is underrated. I wish more people would use split screen.
Yeah,
it's so much fun.
It's just fun.
That's just a lot of fun.
Blowout is fun, and as much as I was annoyed at the music, the ending is a lot of fun visually, at least with like the Liberty Day. It's a Liberty Day celebration, and I'm sure there's some kind of thematic or symbolic meaning to the United States flag and all that. But there's a great shot of her as she's being strangled, and the U.S. flag is in the background, and then John Travolta's character finds her and is holding her, and the fireworks. I think it's probably a green screen shot or a projection shot.
I learned this time that it was green screen.
That's great. Like it's so over the top. I love it. Yeah, it's fun. It's fun. At the very least, I had fun with the film. As much as I wanted a little more tension, a little more kind of systemic pressure on John Travolta and all that. It's fun. It's an entertaining film.
It is a very solid thriller that has just enough going for it that it's elevated past the simple thriller, but not enough to be like revolutionary, I guess. It's a film that I love almost purely based on the filmmaking.
That's fair enough. Can't blame you.
I recommend it.
I recommend it too.
Yeah. Good movie. Now, shall we talk about the second?
Let's talk about the second movie, which I am very curious on a few different levels. Because one, I know you like Blowout so much. So I was curious to see your reaction to the kind of original, the inspiration. It's an inspiration.
The foundation, the blueprint.
Yeah. Of that. Furthermore, this is your first Michelangelo Antonioni film. And he is a very interesting director. And I believe in our conversation last time, I said, without having seen Blowout, I said, definitely, that these two films are entirely different within their filmmaking. And I was correct. They are like they're like wildly different, but also very similar. And I also think that like genre wise, they're very different, but this is perhaps getting ahead of myself. Blow Up is our BFI Sight and Sound movie of the week. It is somewhere on the list in the 60s or the 70s or the 50s. Who knows? Who cares? It's on the list. You can look it up yourself. It is from 1966, directed by Michelangelo Antonioni, who is an Italian filmmaker who's made other movies, obviously, in Italy. And this was his first English language film. It tells the story of a 1960s photographer in London who
In Austin Powers, London.
In Austin Powers, London, full on. Who is a photographer, and it's about a day in the life of him as a photographer and the things that he does. It's about his job as a photographer as much as it is about the murder that is hiding in the middle of the film. And I say hiding because it's really not about that. Even
No.
if you read a plot description, it might seem like it is, but it's about
The
a lot
movie,
more.
if you read the plot description, the movie that you're thinking of is Blowout.
Yes.
Because Blowout is very much the dumb American version of this movie.
Well, I was actually very to make another comment about Blowout. I was happy that Blowout wasn't officially like the dumb American version, because the dumb American version would have had everything tie up nicely at the end and like a happy ending. But she dies at the end of Blowout. So good on the film for sticking to the ambiguous.
Thank you, Brian De Palma, for killing the woman.
morally ambiguous endings. And anyway, so Blow Up. It's a film I've seen before, and I have perhaps a lot to say, perhaps too much. I don't know what we're gonna get at, and I purposely erased my Letterboxd score.
Okay.
I don't know if did you get the chance to see it before I removed it entirely?
Yes, it's 4.5 originally.
Was it? Oh,
no, it was 4. It was 4. Your first one was 4. I didn't know if you rated it again. I don't.
I've seen this film 3 times at this point. This is my
interesting.
Time. Anyway, I yeah. What'd you think of Blow Up?
I didn't hate it, but it bored me to tears.
I had a feeling. that was going to be. I didn't know. I just had a feeling.
Oh man. I want to say right off the bat, it might have been just the unfortunate wrong time to watch it. But about an hour into this movie, I was praying for the credits. I knew it wasn't going to be what I thought. I knew it wasn't going to be Blowout. I know that they're very different. I know a lot of people have said that. But man, I didn't find anything about the movie all that interesting. It felt very Italian.
Wow, Italian, interesting.
Well, okay, here's the thing about Italian filmmakers is that I have a love-hate relationship. I find some of the really, really good ones, they don't do it for me. But The Conformist is amazing. The Conformist is amazing. The Good, the Bad, the Ugly is amazing. I like the original Suspiria. I don't know. It's a movie that I could tell had a lot going on, but I just wasn't bothered to look deeper. I wasn't active enough. And I blame myself for that partially. I want to watch it again. I almost did watch it again today at work, but unfortunately I had a last minute thing to do. So
I think that would have been a mistake. So I'm glad you didn't.
Okay.
I'm glad you should leave it simmer for a little bit. Or at the very least let it fade from your mind, and to go back in just knowing where it goes. Because I think the biggest issue with Blow Up is the expectation of the audience that it's going to be something other than what it is. Like you think it's going to be a plot-driven film based on the description and all that. It is a film with a murder in it, so you think it's, oh, okay, so there's going to be stuff happening. Nothing happens, essentially.
See, I didn't even go in with that expectation. I knew from a few people that it is not at all about the murder. I figured that. But
it is. It is and it isn't.
Yeah.
The murder is the backbone of the film. But like your backbone, it's surrounded by flesh and a bunch of other things that still important, but it's not particularly the focus when you look at it from the outside perspective. And the thing is, the first time I watched Blow Up, and I have had an interesting journey together in that at Zia Records, great store. And if you
I
have a
recommend
Zia
it.
Records account, for every, I think, $13 for some reason, you get a point. And every
It's weird.
point is equal to a dollar amount. So like if you have 5 points and you get something that's $5, you can get that $5 thing half off. And so like a obsessive buyer of movies that I was saving up all of my points to buy a Criterion Blu-ray, which is $30, and to get that half off at $15. And I did. And I was always curious as to what that movie was going to be, and it was Blow Up. Blow Up was
Okay.
the movie I got half off at Zia. And this was after I had seen a couple of Antonioni's films. I'd had interesting relationships with each one of them. And so I watched it. I was like, great, I got a discount. This is awesome. And I watched the movie and I was like, well, this is fine. This is okay. Kind of disappointed in the film. And then the next time I watched it, it was better. Like I was more invested in it. And then this time around, I think it is a masterpiece. I think I genuinely, it's one of those movies where I'm not sure it is very approachable. And the funny thing is that's indicative of of Antonioni's entire filmography. Like my relationship with this film is very similar to my relationship with La Ventura, his other film, which I watched it the first time. I was like, okay, cool. And then on subsequent viewings, I'm like, this is one of the best things I've ever seen. And we'll get to it on the BFI list eventually.
Okay.
But Blow Up, ironically enough, I think is his most approachable film.
Awesome.
It's also the film that Antonioni is most successful financially when it was released. And I'm having it like a difficult time kind of grappling with explaining why on subsequent viewings it works so well for me. Like there's something intangible there still that I can't quite explain. But one of the reasons like I know it's a case of you need to intellectually engage with Antonioni's films. That's the case across the board. Because the way he films is very symbolic, and like the meaning of the film is not in the plot, but in like everything behind the themes, and everything is representative of something else. So it's a film that's not about itself, if that makes sense. It's about the ideas that it's trying to explore.
That's how I felt at the beginning, because it opens with like clowns in a car.
Mm-hmm.
And immediately I'm like, okay, that's gotta be something. And then they come back at the end, and that's what I realized, like, okay, every little scene was some sort of metaphorical puzzle, and I was not watching actively enough. So that's why I'm abstaining from rating it. I'm abstaining from saying I liked it or didn't like it, because so much of this just flew over my head, and it wasn't until about halfway through that I realized I was watching it wrong. But by that point, I had so little to grasp onto what I'd seen before that I just thought, okay, I'm going to rough it through the rest of it. I'm going to let it all sit. And there are definitely moments that have, just over the course of a single day, start to formulate in my head, but I still have little to no mental framework.
Yeah, it is a movie that I think is very subtle. It's not like one of those. The reason why I think it's so good, at least on a rewatch, is that it's not obvious with what it's trying to say or with anything. It's any of the ideas it's exchanging in, and like unlike some films that could like come off as pretentious, I don't think it does. And interesting enough, like I think there's plenty of people who, and I think at this point I've gotten to the place where I like the story. Like I think it's an interesting story. I wasn't in that place when I first watched it, and I'm not sure.
That's where I'm at.
Everyone would be or wouldn't be, but eventually I've gotten on board with the surface level story. But I already, like, even before that, I started engaging and liking what was going on behind the scenes. And it is it's hard to recommend it to someone who doesn't want to actively think about the movies they're watching. Um, but at the same time, this is why like I'm kind of glad we're watching this one first in Antonioni's filmography, because it
Yeah.
is a training session. It is approachable, and regardless of what you think of it, even if you don't end up liking it, it will at the very least train you to think the way that Antonioni approaches his filmmaking work, so that it won't be as difficult later on when we do Le Eclisse and L'Avventura.
Speaking of which, you know what else this movie has a lot in common with? Once again, it's very similar to Under the Silver Lake. I think it is. It's similar because it's about a young horny guy who is who's into this mystery that may or may not be even a mystery, but he goes from scene to scene. There's other young horny people doing eccentric things.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was around the scene with the Yardbirds that I realized that's what was going on. Which, by the way, I don't know if you know, but the guy on the lead guitar, that was Jimmy Page.
I know nothing about music.
Oh, Jimmy Page is the lead guitar player for Led Zeppelin. Led Zeppelin was formed in like the early 70s. This is 5 or 6 years before, when he was with the band The Yardbirds, but it was just funny seeing him.
I really appreciate
5 years
some
before
of
anyone
the
knew.
behind the scenes stuff of this film, of like learning about all the research that Antonioni did, because obviously he's Italian and he came
Very
to England to kind of like soak up the culture and everything that was going on in the 60s. And he's described as someone who is very Italian, like wearing impeccably dressed, fancy suit Italian, someone who's just a serious kind of gentleman kind of figure, who seems almost above all the kind of sexual madness that's happening in Blow Up. But I just find it funny of him like wandering around London and like taking it all in. And I did hear like he did go to concerts of like bands that were playing, and he did go to a Pink Floyd concert back then. And I just find like the image of a well-dressed Italian man just standing, observing in his very intellectual way, observing the crowd in concerts in the swinging London as it is.
You know, halfway through this movie, for like the first half, I thought that the lead actor, was the guy from Clockwork Orange. I don't know why.
Apparently he's been in a lot. I don't know anything that he's been in, but
I looked it up later.
Interesting. I was listening to a interview with him on the way home, and this is when I started getting the feeling that Chandler might not be quite into it. Granted, I wasn't into it when I first watched it, so that was the other reason. But the actor himself, the main actor, after his first screening of the film, Antonioni turned to him and was like, "You didn't like it, did you?" And the main actor was like, "No, I don't understand what the fuck was going on." So even the main actor,
I figured
the guy who is in essentially every single frame of the film didn't get it and didn't like it the first time he watched it, and on subsequent viewings has learned to appreciate it. And I don't know, I'm it's hard to really explain. Like, I don't want to make it seem like it's some kind of like artsy fartsy film, because I don't think it is. It treads close to that, but not quite.
It's not artsy fartsy in the way it's presented. It's filmed. The cinematography is solid. It's not super expressionistic. It's very low key, but it's artsy fartsy again in the way that nothing happens. But again, it's not like, I don't know. I'm not calling it artsy fartsy. I can see why people would think that. It's not like a Bergman. It's not like Lynch. It's grounded. It's real. It's logical, but it's meandering. It's meandering in a way that I understood had intent, but I still don't know what that intent is. So I'm curious to hear what is it? What is it about? What is it about to you? What does it mean?
So this Blow Up is one of the great, like, if it's like a subgenre of movies about making art, and by extension, filmmaking itself. This is a movie that is about photography as an art form and explores what that means, in a way that I don't think is immediately obvious to a lot of people, but has a lot to say there. And I'm frustrated because I'm remaining vague because I don't want to go on a whole tangent, and I will eventually. But it's a film about photography, which I think it, like, hands down, it's the best film about photography. Then again, I can't really think of many others at the moment.
Rear Window.
That's not about photography.
No, I'm just kidding.
Like, it has a photographer, but it's not about photography. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I can't think of anything.
I'm trying to think of like another example. Like, there's plenty of movies that have like, oh, there's a film that's being made in the background, but it's not about filmmaking. It's just incidentally, because that's, you're making a film. Why not throw filmmakers in there?
Yeah.
There's a lot of movies about that. But in terms of photography, I think it's the only movie that's engaging with, on any kind of intellectual level, what it means to be a photographer, and the ethics of taking photos. And it sounds dull, and it's not. It's just not. And one of the reasons that it's such an interesting movie, and it's part of it, is that it's a movie I don't really think a lot about. Like, The Conformist has kind of been like working its way through my mind, of just like thinking about it over the past couple weeks after watching it. This is a movie where like I watch it and I'm engaging with it intellectually a lot, and then I kind of drop it, and I have to actively like bring it up in my mind to start thinking about it again. It's the fact that it's engaging you intellectually and not emotionally. It does have some emotional resonance for me eventually. But that's perhaps why, in its intention, it doesn't stick in your mind, because visually and emotionally, that's the stuff that remains, you think about, that you remember. Like, if you remember any film you love, you remember scenes and the emotions you feel. And that's not what Antonioni's going for here. The other thing that, like, for like the two big elements of the movie, why I find it interesting, is the photography element, which tangentially relates to film making as well. But the other element is, it is a portrait of swinging culture in the swinging 60s of London. Of like, it is a portrait. It is a picture.
It's a photo.
The culture in London at that particular time, which is why it has so much of the rooted in the time period that it was made in. The construction in London, the booming construction, the styles and the fashion, and the culture, the hedonistic culture, the sex and drugs and music and color, vibrancy, but also like the dull background of London. I find that juxtaposition very interesting, that London is still this kind of gray, drab city. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but juxtaposed against like the colorful cars.
It's
dresses,
hard to make London look
outfits.
flashy in the same way that Paris is, because it's always fucking cloudy.
But it is very flashy.
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
and
it's almost like they're rebelling against their background.
Yeah, and there's a way in which these two things kind of work off of each other, and I guess to summarize it succinctly, to try to sell it, is it is a philosophical film on what it means to take a picture. And by take a picture, I mean like the act of recording real life.
Yeah.
And what is a picture? Like, is it a real reflection of real life, or is it merely a fictionalized version of life? Like, can any photo image stand in for reality? And what we do when we mistake the fact, like the line between a photograph and what is real is blurred. And I don't know. Like, there's a lot more I can say. There's a lot of notes that I took on it. I'm just not sure where to begin, and I don't want to like keep going on about all that kind of stuff. But yeah. Any other thoughts from you? Give me a moment to think in peace.
I don't know. I feel like
Acting wise, visually, I don't know.
Visually it's interesting. It's not, it's not flashy, but I know it's not meant to be. I enjoy the scenes of him just taking pictures because I don't know. I like the tactile nature of that old kind of equipment. The two scenes that stick out to me, and the closest I came to feeling or thinking anything is a scene early on where he talks to his painter friend, where he basically says that, like, when I'm painting, I don't feel anything until time passes by and I realize what it was about. At that point, I'm like, oh, maybe that's what they're trying to say about the movie. I don't know.
Yeah.
And it's something that I felt that was the closest that came to being about anything. And the other scene that sticks out in my mind is, again, the scene with the Yardbirds, because I just found it was just a funny scene to me, where it's just a rock concert and everybody's standing perfectly still. Just perfectly still, watching him. The amp has bad feedback, and I have no idea what that scene means and what it was about, but I thought, okay. And I also really like the end scene with the tennis and the mimes, but again, it's one of those things where I'm like, I sense something here. There's a noticeable change in our protagonist who is willingly going along with this game he knows isn't real. I don't know what it means in the context of the film, though. It's a very cryptic movie to me, in a way that stylistically does not feel it would be as cryptic as it is.
So one of the reasons why I have grown in my appreciation of the film is that it very clearly does have a character arc for its main character, which
it does.
I am a big supporter of the fact that your people need to change. Something needs to change in your film in order to justify the story.
Unless you're Llewyn Davis.
Yes, but that is a story of change and return, sort of. Of the it makes the it's physically about trying to change and emphasizing the fact that nothing does change. How to come at this? So I do think it's very like interesting story wise. It is about like a photographer and his job and everything, and about halfway, like a third of the way through the film, he takes photos of a couple in a park, getting down to the actual plot, the business of the film. Spoiler alert. I'm not sure it makes any difference. I think it would be good to go into the film blind just so you can experience it, but just know that ultimately it doesn't matter what it is about so much as it's exploring ideas. Anyway, so he takes photos of a couple in a park, and this is the plot, the main stuff that happens. And the woman of the couple, she doesn't want her photo taken and asks for the photos back, and he refuses. Goes back to his studio and he prints out the photos. And in a scene that is mirrored exactly, but not filmmaking wise, in Blowout, there's both two scenes of the artist using their medium and like turning the raw audio, the raw film into something that they can explore that eventually reveals a murder in the case of Blow Up. And it's a great sequence filming wise. But it eventually, his film is stolen from him and he loses the body and everything. And it's like the murder never even happened. And at the end, he enjoys a game of fake tennis between a bunch of mimes. That's like what it's about for the audience. Obviously, Chandler it, at least on a character level for him, the film is about the emptiness of the culture in London. And I think it is a translation. I think emptiness of culture, of consumer culture in general. of the fashion and the sex and the drugs and consuming and entertainment for entertainment's sake. And we have this main character, this photographer, who is demanding. He's not a particularly good person, which I think is one of the reasons why I find it interesting to watch him, is that he is kind of shitty, kind of a terrible person. He's a bit of a misogynist. He orders people around, but in every scene, he is pursuing something that he wants. It's always, I want photos of this person. I want you to do this. I want a propeller for no reason. I want to take a photo of this couple in the park. They don't want their photo taken. Fuck them. I'm taking it anyway. And the interesting thing is that the movie is making a point of like, he just keeps going. Like he's always on as a person. And he is always moving from one thing to the next. And everything is, he wants something, but it's an empty want. He immediately goes on to something else because it doesn't hold his attention. And the real interesting character and dramatic irony of the film is that he finally finds something that is interesting, that matters, that really matters in this photograph of a murder that has happened. So he begins to construct meaning out of his work in a way. And in a moment of dramatic irony and in almost punishment for him, he loses his work, that the one thing he cares about, gone, poof. And he's so focused on the photograph, he doesn't bother reporting it to the police. He doesn't care. He doesn't really care that there's a murder. He cares about the fact that he's photographed a murder. And he treats that as as a substitute for what has actually happened. And when he goes back to find the body, he finds that that's gone too. And that he's missed his opportunity to
he's got nothing.
Do anything. Right. And this is like, it is a deconstruction at the end of his desire for of photography, that the ultimate failure from him. And then it is a subsequent reconstruction in the very last scene of the mimes playing tennis. So I guess it's ultimately getting at the fact that when you take images or photography, it would be wrong to say that it can substitute for reality itself. Deconstructing the illusion that we often look at an image and think, oh, that's a place, that's a thing, but it's an empty thing. It's not the same thing as being in that place or doing the thing or solving a murder or whatever. The image can't stand in for reality. But the enjoyment is perhaps in the imagination of such a thing. And that in the very end, it is a kind of reconstruction of in a very metaphorical way, of art, of filmmaking, of photography, in that it's an illusion. Like the reality, the tennis ball isn't there. There's nothing there, but that doesn't mean that like you can't find enjoyment from it, and that the physical, like the act of looking at a photograph, is representative of something. And it's what you make of it. You can interpret it, but don't treat it as like the real thing. It's hard to explain. I'm like, I'm not good at this. Like, I'm not good at explaining.
I don't even think it's that. I think I have read like 2 or 3 different reviews of this movie that explain why it's so great. And I'm still like, okay.
Yeah. And, like that's the issue. Like and part of it is, it feels a bit not like a secret, or not like gatekeepy or anything like that, but it feels kind of special of being able to like figure out what the movie is about, because it's not like, it is a puzzle, but it isn't like, it's not obviously a puzzle. Like there's some movies like a Christopher Nolan film, you watch Tenet and it's like, oh, this is a puzzle. I am supposed to figure something out. We're supposed to understand it more. and I have to rewatch it to understand that.
Like Charlie Kaufman's movies.
Yeah, this doesn't feel like it. Like it feels more like it is a character study, which it is in a way, of the main character, and that there's stuff under the surface that isn't obvious, that you can find. Almost like it's a Russian nesting doll of content.
That element did work for me because by the end, with the tennis, the tennis scene is where I first thought, okay, I have the sense that there's been a whole arc. I feel he has changed. But then I thought, how? I don't know. I know he has, but then I'm trying to pinpoint what exactly changes in him and what brought about that change, and I'm like clueless. But again, by the end, I have that feeling. I feel that he's a different person. Just like a lot of this stuff, I feel like I have an interpretation, but then I don't. I don't know. It's one of the very few movies I think I've ever seen in my life where I am absolutely clueless.
Interesting.
I have nothing to say. I have nothing. No interpretation.
I think that's fascinating. That's fun. I like that response. It's hard to have a conversation with that response.
It is.
But
that's why I'm glad you are a little more passionate.
Yeah. Perhaps one last metaphor. And the interesting thing about the film is I think it does, like, it has overarching themes, but I think a lot of the individual scenes can be interpreted on their own to arrive at the conclusion. Like, it's not all, you don't need to find every little clue in every scene to piece it together. You can just look at one scene that is perhaps emblematic of the whole thing. And the scene with the concert and the guitar. To analyze that scene in particular, I would say that the movie is about signifiers, about things representing other things. Like, so the guitar. So in the scene, the musician destroys the guitar and then throws it to the crowd. And
Jeff Beck.
And they all go wild and they want a piece of the guitar. So this is, again, tying back into like the hedonistic nature of the culture, of the superficiality of it. They just want it. Why not? But I think the film is making the point that they are treating the guitar as emblematic of the song and the band itself. Like, they want to.
And the song themselves, they have no reaction to.
Right.
The art is nothing to them, but once the art is tangible, yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Turning the intangible into the tangible. Obviously a scene of nature, a scene in the park, into the tangible, which is the photograph. And
yes.
the fact of consumer culture, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, of wanting the physical thing, but not the real thing. And I think it's also pretty symbolic, although it doesn't necessarily feel like it, that the song keeps on playing just fine.
Yeah.
As he's destroying his guitar. Like, the thing exists still, but no one's paying attention to it because they just want the physical object. And it's, it's like the photo. Well, you could also extrapolate that into culture, because it is a cultural document about London when it was made. And that is the song could be seen as a representation of the culture, but it isn't the same thing as culture. And with the photo, it would be wrong to consider it. It is as like a true reflection of reality, or rather it is a kind of a superficial object that stands in for reality.
See, going off that consumerism angle, there's another scene that I now find interesting in retrospect. The scene where he buys the propeller. It's like he needs it. He fishes it out of the wall. It's like the only thing he wants. He's going out of his way to purchase the propeller. He wants to put it in his car, but it won't fit in his car. So he settles for getting it delivered. And then when it finally gets delivered, it's like he completely forgot about it. It's one of those things that it's there. It's almost like he forgot it was coming. It goes into his apartment. It just, they put it on the floor and they forget about it. Because it's not about what it is. It's about having it. It's about, he needs to have it. Once that satisfaction of having it is done, he moves on to the next thing that he wants to have. So I'm unlocking it piece by piece a little bit. I think I just needed a thematic blueprint to go in, a map, if you will, so I can navigate each scene and see how it ties in. And it's only now that it's starting to surface a little bit.
Mm. And I would agree with you from earlier that you were talking about the line that his friend had, um, that it's only later that meaning appears.
Yeah.
And this interesting thing of, as a photographer myself, I'm often aware of this and not really ashamed, but I'm like, when I'm going places. Speaking of, I was just on a trip to Oregon. Sometimes I have this. I'm torn between. I really want to get a photography of this beautiful scene, but at the same time, like, the photo isn't the same thing as just being there and enjoying.
Because if you're taking the time to set up the photo, you're not experiencing it for real, and the photo might not even come close to what you could be experiencing in that.
And it won't. It's impossible for a photo to do that, even if it's a great photo. I think.
Yeah.
Like, photography it changes reality. We think of it as a representation of the real things, of the facts of something, but it's not. And yeah, so yeah, I guess the other reason why I like this more is that, like, in the past couple of years, I've gotten more in touch with photography and been doing a lot of that. So I find it personally applicable, or at the very least reflexive on the work that I'm currently doing and all that kind of stuff.
The photography scenes are fun.
Yeah.
I do like the little click. Nice little click.
There's a great tactile nature to old film cameras.
A lot smaller than I thought it would be.
Yeah. Last little comment of, like, an example of, like, things that are representations, like a scene that is interesting thematically but doesn't necessarily have to connect to everything. Very early in the film, our main photographer guy is taking a photo, having a photo shoot with a model, and the scene is very clearly linking photography to sex. Like, it's a sex
very
scene.
Clearly it is.
He's
on top of her in a way. There's a visible climax. Yeah, that's early on. That's like the first scene. Yeah.
Second.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. No. I and, like, to even further go, like, there's tons of this stuff. Like, you just keep finding ways in which things that are real and tangible are commoditized, are turned into representations of those things, which is, he's making a book about real London. And you get very brief glimpses of the photographs, and you see, like, photographs of real, like, poverty, people suffering. It's described as, like, a violent book. And it's very interesting. Like, all this trouble and turmoil and stuff, he's, like, raw feelings and emotion he's trying to capture with his photography, is ultimately turned into just this commodity, this photography book that is for other people to buy and enjoy and think that they've experienced or looked at these kinds of things, but they haven't. It's not the same thing as being there or anything like that.
I agree.
Anyway.
I had something to say now. I forgot.
Also, a connection with Blowout is the use of wind in the trees. Both scenes when he's taking the photo and John Travolta is recording the sound. They both take place in parks, with the wind very prominently featured in the trees.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I feel like most movies that are this cryptic, they use powerful, striking imagery to let the audience know that what you're seeing, this particular moment, has meaning. This doesn't. There are no visual signifiers to let the audience know that this is what you should be focusing on. This has meaning. This is indicative of what the movie's about. It's all very matter of fact. It's all very rooted and real, but it's just the sort of how it all plays out in your head afterwards. It's very odd. It's asking so much of you, but it's not begging in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
It's odd. I've never seen a movie like it.
Yeah, no, yeah, that's Antonioni. I don't know of any filmmaker that's quite like Antonioni. And it'll be interesting to interact with his other films, particularly L'Avventura, which is, like, if you think this is, like, opaque, in terms of what it's trying to get at. That is a film that very infamously caused boos and walkouts at Cannes. But then good old, I think it was Truffaut and our friends from the French New Wave were like, no guys, this is the shit. This is great. And it is, L'Avventura is the most interesting film where it's like every shot is just littered with meaning. Like the framing and the composition is the meaning, but it doesn't feel like that at all. Like you can entirely ignore it. And that's what you do on the first watch. And then on subsequent viewings, you're like, wait, there's a lot of other stuff going on under the surface. And
but this movie didn't feel littered with meaning to me.
No, that's what I'm trying to get at. It's hard to explain, but like all of Antonioni's work. And I'm just trying to get at the fact that L'Avventura is so dense, and yet you do not notice it whatsoever. And it is just like you watch it. Like, what did I watch? What was the point of that? Anyway, I find it very interesting. Antonioni is a filmmaker for me. I don't know. Like it's just, I like that of the surface level of the film being interesting and feeling kind of artsy, but also just kind of there. But then getting the chance to interact with it in a way that doesn't demand your interaction. I like that style. And I think the more I watch Antonioni's films, especially Blow Up, because his other films are very clearly stylistically beautiful, but this one less so. But the more I watch it, the more I realize how like controlled the image is in every single scene, and the choices. Like if Blow Out is very much an expression of Brian De Palma, he's choosing all the different means and expression of filmmaking, and it's like it's expressive, it's expressionistic. He's just choosing whatever works, and colors and lights. This is very controlled and almost like modernistic. Like it's a piece of modernism, postmodernism. That's it. The dreaded postmodernism.
I still have no idea what that word means. I won't even try. No one does.
I don't want to go into more. I could kind of fumble my way through a definition, but I don't want to. I'm not the best at explaining this stuff, but anyway. Another very emblematic line that might not appear. So the model at the very beginning, the sex scene model, the photography sex scene model, she says, "Oh, I'm going to Paris." And then later on, she appears in the film in the like the party house, and he recognizes her, and he says, "I thought you were supposed to be in Paris." And then she says, "I am in Paris." Meaning, you don't. It's very subtle in the film. You'd have to like. It only is apparent on like.
What does that mean?
The illusion, like a lot of the film is talking about like the illusion of life and art and stuff like that. But that I keep thinking of the end scene, the last line in the film being there, completely unrelated, but also the very last line of that film is life is a state of mind, which I feel like this film is kind of dealing with, but in a very different way than that film.
Interesting.
Anyway, I like it. I think it should be on the BFI list, but I wrestle with it because it's kind of not exactly approachable, but I think in terms of the fact that it is a movie about photography, which is unique, and the fact that Antonioni is so interesting in the way that he deals with ideas and his filmmaking, I think it's a very, very well-made movie.
I abstain. I'm not going to say it deserved it. I'm not going to say it doesn't deserve it. I don't understand it enough to make that decision.
I'd probably put it lower. Like I'm not saying this is kind of like all-time masterpiece. I think it's near the bottom of that list, but I think it's doing. Like I know uniqueness in and of itself isn't enough of a quality to get on the list, but I think it's doing what it's doing well enough that it justifies its place here.
Was Brighter Summer Day on the list, or do we just do that for fun?
No, Brighter Summer Day was on the list.
Okay, interesting. Well, hey, good.
Well,
I have free time this Saturday, so I thought to myself, I'm gonna rewatch a long movie because usually I don't have that much free time. So I'm like, I'm gonna maybe rewatch Seven Samurai. Maybe I'll rewatch Brighter Summer Day. Maybe I'll rewatch An Elephant Sitting Still. Still don't know. Figure it out.
Yeah. I don't know what's next. I don't know where I've put my list. We'll figure it out. We'll do something.
I know we have somewhat in the future. We have Goodfellas and A Woman Under the Influence. There's only two I know.
We'll figure it out. Another episode of Split Take Podcast. Thanks for listening. If you got it all the way, let us know what you thought of Blow Up and Blow Out. Blow Up and Out, as I like to call the both of them. And what is the meaning of both of them? I think that's a valid question. I still don't know what the meaning of Blowout is. I think there's more to interact with that film, and I think there's always more to interact with Blow Up. So let us know what you think of the movies. Which do you like better? We didn't even bring up The Conversation, which we shouldn't. Don't comment, Chandler, please. But that is
okay.
That is another in like this trilogy of art discovers murder.
Oh, you mean
films.
okay, that one? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it is a very clear, like if you're looking for a triple feature,
yeah,
like they form a kind of cohesive trilogy.
They do.
Although they've been directed by different people, and they're all very different films, each in their own right. Anyway, Split Take Podcast. I don't know how to finish these things.
Split Take Podcast. That's all you need.
Yeah.
But see ya.